Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Prose Notes, a graduate writing podcast. It is I, Samantha Demerly,
And
PhD.
I.
No,
Oh, no.
PhD. I have to finish it.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Demerly.
No, it's okay. My brother texted me the other night and said, "Hey, you didn't include your PhD in that thing." And I said, "That's okay. They don't care." And he said, "I care."
Oh,
and
okay.
I thought that was great. So,
Well, Dr. Demerly.
thank you. Yes. Put some respect on the name.
Honestly, I should. It was rude of me. I thought you were done talking.
No, it's okay.
And hello, I'm Eden, not PhD
Aw,
yet.
not yet.
ABD.
ABD. She's there. She's all but dissertation. Well, today we've got a great topic for our listeners. We are going to be talking about writing for conferences. So many graduate students will attend conferences for networking, for building their CVs, as well as connecting with new scholarship and new ideas. But we want to kind of talk about the specifically graduate experience of going to conferences, because it is a little bit different than when you're, quote unquote, an established scholar and presenting ideas that maybe other people know about.
Yeah.
You're not new to the scene. But before we begin, of course, we want to kind of open this up with a fun goof and gaff, a thought experiment for the two of us. So, Eden, what was the most fun conference presentation or conference paper that you ever wrote? This can be real, or this can be an imaginary thing that you make up right now.
Well, so I have a real one, and then I have a paper that, I want to do. So my real one is a paper I wrote about The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, in comparison to the music from Ocarina of Time, which I explore exotic elements of how the music is represented in both games, specifically looking at the Hylian people and the Gerudo people.
Interesting.
Because the music for the Gerudo people is distinctly exotic.
Yeah.
And the way that Nintendo treats them is different in both games. So that was my paper that I was super stoked about. Presented that in New York at the Music and the Moving Image conference, and that was a super good experience.
That's awesome.
And then a paper that I would love to write, that I've been trying to write for 3 years, is on the music from God of War 2018.
Oh, so good.
Bear McCreary on that soundtrack. I've mentioned it, I think, before on the podcast. But he treats the themes very, very differently based on what's happening in the story. And there's a lot of interesting growth that happens in the music. And when we talk about themes changing, they're called leitmotifs. So for some people who they might know, when you think about a theme that really is strongly associated with a character, a lot of times people think John Williams, Star Wars, So same sort of ideas happening in the Bear McCreary soundtrack for both God of War 2018 and Ragnarok. So there's a paper that I want to write that explores that. And I just love video game music. And I never read about it in my regular research life because I'm busy writing about how cool flutists are in the 20th century.
They are cool.
They are cool. But I love video games, and I just want to talk about them with cool people. And so those are my papers, both very video game related, but I think that they are fun, and I want to explore more of that.
The amazing thing about being an academic is that at some point you can just do that and make that your whole steez.
I cannot wait. As much as I love researching flutists and all that kind of stuff, there's a real part of me that wants to really get into the ludomusicology scene, but I can't until I'm done with my dissertation.
Yeah, just one more year.
Yeah,
one more year,
exactly.
and then you can start in the ludo music scene.
Yes, it'll be good. Anyways, what's the paper for you?
So I will say two papers. One is something I've already written, which at this point is kind of hilarious because it was many, many years ago. But I did a paper in one of the earlier years of my grad experience that was about the serpent in Paradise Lost and kind of his sin and how Milton structures the understanding of like what went wrong in that moment with the serpent. It was a really fun paper. People seemed to like it. Oh, I guess I did also do another fun paper for the International Medieval Congress at Western Michigan University, Kalamazoo, where I talked about the prioress's tale and how, like, her relationship to children and pregnancy. I had a person come up to me after that talk and go, "Oh, amazing project. Are you going to publish this?" And I go, I'm not a medievalist. I'm technically a Shakespeare scholar. I'm just here for kicks and giggles.
I'm masquerading here.
Yeah, it was very flattering because they literally wanted me to like publish this idea, but no, that was just me having fun.
just a horse in a trench coat at this conference.
It's pretty cool when you write something for fun and people are like, "Oh, that's brilliant." It does make you feel good.
No, the Zelda paper that I wrote got some like, "Oh my god," like great reactions.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh,
this is it. This is what we want."
Am I rad?
Am I awesome? Yeah. Perhaps. The paper that I would love to work on, I guess part of my interest is still kind of reworking and recontextualizing and evolving my dissertation project. So I've been really interested in still minor characters, but like representations of characters where they're really kind of advocating for themselves and no one's listening. Just that.
That's
like,
so real.
Yeah, for sure. But so my hope would be to develop out my chapter on Antony and Cleopatra for my dissertation and to like really kind of think through those minor characters, because there's a great scene in the play where the soldiers of Antony come up to him and he's like, "All right, get ready for a naval battle." And they're like, "Sir, we're not trained in naval warfare." And,
Sir?
And he goes, "Don't worry about it." And they're like, please don't just literally send us to our deaths.
I get seasick.
Yeah, it's a very interesting moment because, a lot of scholars talk about it in terms of like Antony's overconfidence, and that's certainly
It's
part of
centered
the
on
problem.
him. Yeah.
But those characters are literally saying, "Hey, man, we don't know how to do this.
I can't swim.
I've never been taught." I mean, which is actually true. A lot of historical peoples did not learn how to swim. It is a more modern skill than we think. But anyway, that would be kind of my project. A lot of fun kind of evolution. So we'll see if that ever happens or if I'm just like, thinking about it forever.
Hey, that happens too. Sometimes ideas just sort of float around in your brain and you're like, that's cool.
Yeah.
If I write something on this, that's great. If I don't, hey, that happens.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, well, that sounds like a fantastic paper. It sounds like the kind of thing people would be like interested in at a conference.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot of work to be done in the Shakespeare field about this topic, but if people actually care is a different thing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's transition into our actual topic for today. So we are going to talk about conferences, but we're going to structure this around kind of almost like an introduction to conferences for graduate students. And then I want us to talk a little bit about how to actually write papers for this type of audience, because it is different than a journal article. It's different than a dissertation. And so we'll talk about some of the strategies and affordances of like a conference presentation. But let's get into the goal of conferences. Eden, what is your goal when you go to a conference?
Well, the first thing is to, one, get into the conference and present some research. For me, initially, it's that like, I need more lines on my CV because I'm just starting out as a scholar. I've done a couple conferences, but it's not like I'm like, I go to a conference every 4 minutes. I'm not one of those people who is like always constantly getting in and going to things and places. When I get into a conference and I commit to going, then my next thing is like, okay, who am I going to meet there? Who's all going to be there? And I always like scan the program booklet that usually they send it out like ahead of time. And I try and like look for things that, like, one, look interesting to learn about, and two, look for scholars who I either have like, we've been like circling around each other, but like we have never
the dance,
never the two shall meet, kind of a thing. So networking is like a huge part of it. I think honestly, networking is probably the biggest reason to go to conferences. Aside from like learning cool things, and hearing cool papers and all that kind of good stuff. But for me, networking is like the biggest part because, we get so insular at our own universities. There's a lot of really cool research happening at every university, and professors come to these conferences. Other graduate students come to these conferences. Professionals who maybe don't hold a teaching position, but they're doing interesting research, they also can attend these sorts of things. So that's kind of like the biggest thing for me. Otherwise, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that like the main goal for me, but I think that those are kind of the broad strokes, like meet new people, learn cool things, and present my research. And oftentimes, those things all just sort of like, they like go hand in hand. Everything like is cyclical. Like you go to a presentation and you talk to that person afterwards, and like, and then they introduce you to someone, and it kind of, and the cycle continues.
Yeah. Do you usually go with faculty members from your school, or are you kind of off on your own at these conferences?
I have straight up just been a loner.
Okay. Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is because I'm going to say this. It's not that my faculty in my department don't go to conferences. It's that they go to the really big ones. And so the big one for musicology is called AMS, or the American Musicological Society. We also have the Society for American Music, two separate things, AMS and SAM.
Neat.
Yeah, exactly. You're a conference now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a lot of interesting scholarship, but so like they go to the bigger ones usually, and a lot of them are well enough established that they don't feel the need to be doing conferences so often, and a lot of them are mostly focused on publishing, especially here at an R1. A lot of times they're like, I'm in the middle of writing a book. So, do I really want to write a conference paper? And sometimes the answer is yes, especially, half the time one of my faculty members, he likes to do the European conferences because he's from Europe. So, like, that's where he likes to go. And it's not like I can catch a ride to the Czech Republic all the time. So, but yeah, so I've mostly been a loner, which is a hard way to do it sometimes if you don't have that from another faculty member. So there's merit to doing it both ways, I think.
There's also merit to going by yourself for the flexibility of going by yourself. Yeah. I've certainly gone to conferences where we went with a group of people and mostly like colleagues from my department, and you kind of get stuck going to similar things. Yep. So, I think having a game plan going into a conference, if you are going to go to with a group of people, to say, all right, let's split up, meet back here, that kind of logistics. But I do think that your observation brings up a good point. There are different types of conferences, and graduate students, especially as you're thinking about where to go and where to present your ideas, that's a consideration. Yeah. So there are usually big conferences in every field. There are going to be mid-sized conferences that more people attend, but it might be a more diverse audience, or scholars or intellectuals from kind of tangential fields who are interested in your topic, but maybe not talking specifically about the field. There are also graduate conferences that are usually hosted by graduate students in a particular program at a particular institution. And for any graduate student, I highly recommend looking at those. They're smaller, they're usually more friendly and more kind of intimate in the sense of these are all your peers, everybody presenting as a graduate student. And often they have like, I don't know, happy hours and stuff.
Right, yeah. Yeah, they have like fun little extras or like free food, because not every conference does.
That's true, yeah. I had been on our conference committee for 2 years at Indiana University. And so 1 year I was just part of the planning committee, and then the second year I was the co-chair of the conference. So those are also great learning opportunities. If your department or your school does have a graduate conference, I always recommend at least helping out in some way, shape, or form. It's a lot of work to co-chair or chair a conference, but you can be part of some committee or volunteer the day of if you want to simply support your colleagues and help with that effort. So in thinking about the different types of conferences that we can present our ideas at or even apply to, let's talk about what it means to, like, what kinds of sessions are at different conferences. And this is going to be different depending on the type of conference you go to, but generally there are some pretty standard session types. So Eden, why don't you talk us through that?
Yeah, so for most of the conferences I've been to, there's the traditional paper where someone stands at the front of the room with probably a PowerPoint and they read a paper at you, and hopefully they've got some interesting ideas, and then there's questions afterwards. There is sometimes there's like for us in music, there's often lecture recitals or recitals proper. So like there's performance aspects at some kinds of.
I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah. So I'll talk about it later, but I was just at a conference and a good portion of what was going on was recitals and lecture recitals. So interesting little quick music thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's all sorts of different other things like posters. You can make your own panel. That's something I've seen that's popular recently in that a panel is usually 3 papers by individuals, and it's prepackaged so that the conference doesn't have to like sift through a million individual papers, and they just say, oh, this panel looks great, and they plop you on there. So it's like an individual paper sort of thing, except it's, it's 3 papers purposefully paired together. Oh my gosh, that's like a lot of P sounds.
Well, you could get together with some friends from your department, say, hey, we're all doing similar types of research. Let's propose a panel together.
Yeah, no, which is actually what my friends and I just did to try and get into the big musicology conference in 2025. And we all have similar research that has to do with American orchestras. So we all said, okay, what's the link between our research? And we kind of found a link, and we said, all right, here's the proposal. So that's something that people do as well. Otherwise, there's workshops. Sometimes you can attend virtually. Roundtables are also popular. I'm trying to think, have I covered everything? I think I've
Poster presentations, often at conferences, and it depends on the conference, but there will be a kind of area where posters will be set up. And during specific times of the day, scholars will kind of stand by their posters and talk to you about their research if, you come up and sound interested. Usually those are like a 3 to 5 minute kind of elevator pitch of what you're doing, your methodology, your results. But often those are just like a passive kind of element of conferences. So when, the person's not standing there, you're free to review and to kind of glance at the research that's happening.
Like a fun little science fair kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I guess in kind of corollary to your lecture recitals, I guess at Shakespeare conferences, they often have readings. Oh. They'll often have like a little like scene reading or some sort of sonnet reading of Shakespeare, which is always fun. Yeah. Usually there's a very British man who gets up and uses his very British voice to serenade you with some sort of sonnet, and you're like, hell yeah.
Or not to be.
Oh, exactly. So there are always, I think, fun affordances. I had mentioned before we started recording, but I went to a medieval conference and there was a mead tasting because mead is a very important part of kind of medieval culture, especially European medieval culture. And so there's always a bunch of people drinking very, very strong mead.
Yes, this is the basement mead that we made from last year's conference.
Yeah. Do they teach you how to do it? Maybe. I don't remember.
Oh my God. Well, if the mead was that strong. No, for sure. Yeah. I think that roughly covers like the different formats. And again, you may encounter a format that is like unique to your own discipline because, everyone's got their own special thing a lot of the times, like music. Yeah. The recitals are always fun. And usually they're highlighting, music that is related to like the conference topic or something like that. So it's always related.
Yeah.
But, who knows what other kinds of formats there are in like math conferences.
Oh,
Do they have
yeah.
math offs?
I don't know. That'd be cool.
Do they like calculate things? I have no idea.
We got to talk to the math department.
I'm scared.
No, we love you, math folks. But so we're kind of glancing over a lot of different topics. There are many conferences now that are totally virtual, and that will still have a variety of session types, including workshops, panels, but in a virtual format, which is a way to get more people to attend a conference, especially since travel is expensive, and definitely consideration for a lot of scholars of like, do I have time to travel, take the time off, travel to a new city, even if that would be really cool. Sometimes it's just not in the cards.
You just don't have the time or the budget. And that's definitely something to consider when you're applying for conferences, is there may come a point where you have to choose, which ones can I go to? Are there virtual options for some? Maybe take those virtual options. And then also, then if you get into another in-person one, you can spend your money on the one that is solely in person. Because there are still conferences that are pretty much just in person. Yeah. I actually had a friend who attended a conference virtually that was hosted in Canada.
Whoa.
French Canada, though. And she was the only English speaker there.
Interesting.
And they said that they were going to have all this great support for like translation and all that kind of stuff, because it was supposed to be in English and French. It was pretty much just in French. They didn't actually have as much support for the English speakers as they said they would. And so she was like, well, I'm really glad I didn't go in person.
Yeah.
So there are weird little things that can happen like that too at conferences. But she was really happy that she had the Zoom option because she lives in Indiana. And she was like, I can't afford to go to Toronto right now or wherever it was.
Often conferences will have some sort of internal travel funding, so you can certainly apply for that travel funding. Some departments have travel funding that you can apply for. So as you're making decisions of where to go, what conferences to attend, why you're attending them, do consider your own finances. I think the virtual option is often the cheapest option. You may... if you're the type of person who wants to go explore a new city, in person is wonderful, but it is going to be expensive in the long run.
No, and honestly, there have been some conferences that I have had to like make it work because I really wanted to go. The New York conference I brought up, I had to make that work because I had applied for funding through KU, but just didn't receive it because they had spent the money already. So that's, money is not infinite at any college, and oftentimes that's something that like you have to decide, is this really worth is this worth my $2 that I earn? But also like I wouldn't trade that experience. Like I'm really glad I spent the money to do that one, and then I got funding for another one down the line, so things even out.
Sometimes conferences will have kind of cheaper blocks for hotel reservations. So definitely be on the lookout for those. I know the big International Medieval Congress, they have a option for staying in dorm housing on campus, which is it's a much cheaper option than staying in a hotel. And you get a fun dorm experience.
I did that for New York. So the conference in New York was at NYU. And they had, because hotels are crazy expensive in New York City. So I saved like a good chunk of change. My back, however, definitely paid the price. So that's the other thing, is sometimes those dorm rooms, they've got those old weird blue mattresses. You know the ones. The ones.
Those terrible mattresses.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, it was probably worth the money I was saving. So,
absolutely.
What's a little bit of back pain, right?
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about the kind of structure of a conference, as well as some of the, affordances or even considerations if you are going to attend a conference. But let's talk about getting into a conference. So most conferences ask for some sort of proposal. I get a lot of questions from graduate students about what goes into that proposal. Should they have a paper written already? Should this be a new idea that they are kind of thinking through and they don't have conclusions for yet? And usually what happens, or usually my answer is all of the above.
Yeah.
You can certainly apply for a conference with a paper you've already written. Usually you're going to be asked to submit a 250-word proposal, and that's just going to be a summary of the thing you've already done. A lot of graduate students use this as an opportunity to play with a new idea, something they haven't necessarily written yet. And so in that case, you really are writing a little proposal. So talking about kind of the issue or the problem you're observing, some methodological considerations, what theories are you going to use to solve or analyze this issue, and then kind of what you expect to find. The fun thing about these proposals is that no one else sees them. So if you get into a conference with, a proposal, as long as the conference has an updated title for your paper, they don't care if it's changed.
Yeah.
They don't really pay attention to what you actually present in the moment.
Yeah.
So I do think that this is one of those nice elements of conferences where there's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
The proposals just to kind of demonstrate that you're thinking about the topic of the conference. But if your paper changes or if, your conclusions are different than what you propose, that's okay. There's really no one who's going to slap you on the back of the wrist for even changing your idea.
The conference police will not come get you.
No, there's no. There should be. Are there conference police?
I don't know. Depending on the venue, I think.
Security, but probably not police.
But not people policing your content.
Yeah,
really.
not people policing your content. So in order to get into a conference, you do want to think about the conference topic. However, conference designers, the conference committees, try to make these intentionally broad so that a lot of scholars can tie their research into a particular topic. But you do want to try to speak to that topic as much as you can. So using the keywords from the conference description or the call for papers, as well as making sure that you are considering the audience of the conference. So a lot of scholars want to hear about this topic. They're going to this conference because maybe this conference is speaking to something that they're interested in discovering. So making sure that your research does explicitly tie in with the conference topic is important. I've been to a lot of conferences where the person presenting has a very tangential tie to the conference topic, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's harder for people to ask you questions and engage with your ideas if that's not really why they're there to learn.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's usually the first thing I think about when I'm looking for conferences, when I have my own ideas. I'm like, okay, so right now my dissertation is on women in 20th century American orchestras, specifically flutists. I applied to 2 conferences with a single proposal. And it got into one of the conferences, and the conferences I chose very specifically because of that. So I applied for the National Flute Association's annual convention. Did not get into that, unfortunately, even though it was very flute specific. Apparently, they had record numbers of
interesting
of applicants this year, and a very limiting venue. Actually, I actually spoke to someone, and they were like, "Yeah, we had one room where we could do papers." So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is, and the convention is generally more performance based, but the conference that I did get into was called She, a festival for women in music. So topic wise, woman flutist, perfect. Fits really well. And so I got in and got to talk about that. But with my video game papers, I specifically look for conferences that, cater to music in the moving image. There are a couple of video game music conferences cropping up now, actually. They're especially in the past couple years. So there are new conferences that do appear. kind of periodically as well. And sometimes things are like super, super niche topic based, where it's like we're doing a conference on the music from Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, cool. I've got a paper for that, or like whatever.
Yeah.
I don't, but someone else does, I'm sure.
Is it at in Japan?
Yeah, actually, weirdly, a lot of these super like niche topics are here.
Oh,
these weird little niche,
yeah.
conference topics, like where they're like, we're specifically doing a conference on this like one thing this year. They're usually a broader like organization, but then they have a really specified like what they want. So it is like the most important consideration when you're thinking about your research ideas. Like, realistically, what could this paper get into?
Yes.
And does it fit a lot of different types of conferences?
Yeah.
And if it does, just pepper them.
Yeah.
Apply to all of them.
Certainly shop around.
Yeah, exactly.
One of probably the best pieces of advice I had received in grad school regarding conferences is I learned this after I had already gone to a bunch of conferences and presented papers that weren't related to my research. But part of the goal of attending a conference and presenting your work is to establish yourself as a scholar of that topic.
Yeah.
So it is really beneficial for graduate students to think about, what niche am I carving out for myself? Because people will remember you for that topic, for that research paper. So you almost want to make sure that your presentations are related to your dissertation or the research you want to be known for. Yeah. So thinking about the conferences that you're attending and the proposals that you're proposing, think about like what you want to be remembered for, because that's going to be a good way to connect, to meet with scholars who are interested in that topic, and to start to develop out the ideas for either that project or, the dissertation or even the book that you might be thinking about in the future. So try to tailor your conference attendance and your conference presentations to research that is you. That is something you want to be known for. Much like my anecdote at the beginning, I wrote about the Prioress Tale. I didn't want to be known as a Chaucer scholar. Yeah. So that was a little bit of it was fun, but it was kind of a waste of my time because I wasn't planning on publishing that paper. Yeah. Those people remember me as a Chaucer scholar, except for that's not who I am. So yeah. Interesting little learning experience there. Okay, so let's get into the actual considerations for the paper itself.
Yeah, writing. The thing we're here for.
The writing of this paper. I think this is an important topic because a lot of graduate students are used to much more formal types of writing. And I don't want to say that you can kind of totally go off the rails and that this is like an entertainment space. But often conferences have a little bit more flexibility for you to be more casual and maybe a little bit more entertaining in your presentation than you might normally be in your writing. I also like to think of conference papers as not being papers, they are scripts. They are kind of you presenting an idea in a way that's going to be engaging to an active audience. And so you want to think about how sometimes the very stiff academic prose doesn't really work if you're saying it out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. That's like the biggest thing to remember is that like you can loosen up a little. Now, do I think you should be throwing dudes, mans, and like all that kind of stuff into your paper? It depends on the conference.
I usually say you get 1 or 2 jokes per paper.
Yeah. You gotta keep the comedy like just light and not like so pervasive. But it is definitely a different experience than like writing a paper for class.
Yes.
Sometimes conference papers don't even like need like a hardcore like argument that you're like gonna lay down your life for.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're more informative papers, that kind of thing too. So like you have a wider range of like flexibility for what you're able to do with a conference paper, and it's also usually a lot shorter than you're probably used to writing because I don't know about you, but every conference I've ever been to, I've had 20 minutes to read. And then there's 5 to 10 minutes for questions. And it is so, so, so important to stick to the timetables because there are other people presenting before and after you. People want to get to different sessions. And also, you were allotted some time. So, stick with it, which means that your paper inevitably can't be, this 20-page masterpiece that you're like, and in the end, my research is the best research forever, the end. It's, you gotta stick with, the parameters that they're giving you. And I've been to papers that went like 10 minutes over, and people get spicy in the audience, and actually usually the moderator will cut you off at a certain point. I've actually watched it happen, and the scholar did not look pleased that they got cut off.
There is probably one of the biggest conference faux pas is going over your allotted time. So as you're writing your papers, as you're thinking about your topic and you're drafting your scripts, read through them and read through them at a pace that feels comfortable to you. I know when I get nervous, I go very quickly, which is actually great for conferences. I try to slow down when I'm drafting and I'm practicing my presentation, and then I end up going pretty quickly anyway. So thinking about this as something that you really do need to be very specific about timing. And another thing, like I said, in terms of this being a script, drafting in moments of pause and taking a drink of water so that you are giving yourself a little bit of flexibility both within the presentation itself and to give your audience a little break of oh, now I'm thinking about the amazing thing that they just said. These are also often kind of, they are synchronous presentations, so you can have handouts that people get. If you have visuals, you can have a PowerPoint presentation or some sort of visual on the screen that you can actively refer to. And audience members in conferences like that. They like being part of the conversation. They like having visuals. They like having handouts. You can kind of use any mode of interactivity that you feel is going to be helpful to that audience.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I can also include audio examples. A lot of the time, music conferences, you get to hear little clips of cool pieces or
That's
whatever.
Awesome.
And you get to see the fun, horrible picture of the composer on the screen at some point.
You do have to make sure your technology works, though.
Yes, that is a really important part of conferences.
The most embarrassing thing would be for you to be like, "Oh, my audio file's not working."
And I have seen it happen.
No,
actually, it has happened to me because someone messed with the the podium stuff, and everyone was having problems. So no one could play their audio examples. That kind of thing happens at conferences too, and there is a point at which you have to roll with the punches. So got to be flexible.
Did you just sing?
Just start singing the Hot to Know Village theme.
Yeah.
Dum, dum, dum. No, actually, God bless him. Dr. Laird, my advisor who was on the podcast last episode, he ran to his office, found some speakers from 1990, and we hooked that up to my computer, and I had sound.
Amazing.
I was the only one in my session with sound.
What a superstar.
He was, bless him. Amazing man. And the fact that he was able to find those speakers from 1990 in his very, very crowded office was kind of amazing. So it just makes me laugh. I'm oh my goodness. But so tech issues do happen as well. I also, actually, at every conference I've ever presented at, I've had a tech issue. And one of them, we did a full check. Everyone got their stuff up on the screen, got everything, tried their audio. And then when it came time to present, I was the first one to present. We plugged me back in. And within the time that the last person plugged in and the time that I plugged in, the HDMI cord stopped working.
Oh, my gosh.
And we had to literally wheel in a TV. I'm telling you, it's stressful.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, all right, time to read a paper.
Yeah. I think the advice for our listeners is have a plan C. Have a plan A, plan B, and plan C for your paper, just in case. Everything goes wrong.
No, but I know a lot of people who have never had an issue at a conference. I think I'm just deeply unlucky.
Oh, no.
But it's fine, I expect it at this point. So now I can just be that prepared person.
Yeah.
So, is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's there's always things like that. And you can't always anticipate everything. But at the end of the day, you have research that you can present without, any aid. It's really nice to have it, but always remember that at the end of the day, you have research in front of you. You've got your paper.
Yeah.
You've got it. It's going to be okay.
And the moderators are often there to help you with tech issues or, if there's kind of timing weirdness. So, be nice to your moderators.
Always be nice.
They are there to help you. They're there to make sure that everyone has equitable space to talk. And often those are roles that like people are volunteering into. So they're there to learn as much as they are there to help you.
Yeah.
In terms of attending a conference, I do think that there are things that if you're a graduate student, if you've never been to a conference before, I feel like there are just kind of some logistical pieces of advice that we can offer. One is that conferences can be very overwhelming.
Yes.
I'm a little introvert, so it is a lot of social energy that I have to expend to attend a conference.
Yeah.
It's usually worth it, but I do find that there are ways to pace yourself.
Yes.
And there are ways to make sure that you are not overextending yourself at a conference in a way that's going to make you lose sleep or get really stressed or get triggered in some way. So, go in with a plan. Eden, you mentioned earlier that there's a conference agenda or some kind of schedule.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate the schedule?
So first thing I do is I decide, okay, so when's the first session? Do I want to get there at 8 a.m. if that's the time that the first session starts? I'm not a morning person. Sometimes I'm like, unless it's something I really, really want to go to, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to plan to get there around 9 or 10, whatever time feels right to me for whatever sessions are being planned. And for myself, since I've always gone alone, usually I'm just planning myself.
Yep.
So I usually get there and if I have a hard copy of the booklet of like the schedule, I'll highlight the things that I want to go to. And if there's two things at the same time, then you have to make a decision. I also will, kind of plan my breaks because I have to plan in breaks for myself as well because I am not a social lady. These kinds of things are really hard for me in part because I'm really quiet. You guys would never know, but but I
on our audio podcast.
I am actually a really quiet person in my day-to-day life. I'm not. It's unnatural for me to seek out these kinds of conversations, so I have to plan myself some breaks. So I usually plan breaks where I see papers that I don't particularly care about seeing. Not everything is going to be of interest to you at a conference. That's really important to recognize. Don't feel bad if you don't go to everything because you can't go to everything, and also you're gonna need a minute.
It's also okay if you're presenting and audience members in your session don't seem engaged.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh yeah. No.
It's all right.
Everyone's just there to hang out and ask cool questions afterwards. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me it's what do I really want to go to? How long am I really willing to stay? I'll say that. So I attended a conference just before spring break and I spoke on the first day. I'm going to say this. I spoke to 5 people.
Hell yeah.
It was 4:30 in the afternoon.
Classic.
At the University of Arkansas.
Yep.
And I spoke to 5 people.
Yep.
And sometimes that's how your papers will go. You won't always have a huge crowd. And sometimes it's really nice to just talk to 5 people and be like, this is a cool casual thing that we're doing here. But I planned to go to a couple events on the first day because I was going to be there because I had to be one of the first presenters. So I attended things until there weren't things to attend, which was really 4:30 to 6, I want to say, for the first day. And then I had dinner by myself because I didn't know anyone there. And then the next day I was like, okay. So I had met this really cool flutist before I left for the day. And she was doing her recital at 9. So I was like, okay, so I'm getting there at 9 then. And I'm going to go to this recital, and I'm going to go to 2 other things directly after it because there's 2 other things that really interest me. And then I'm going to take a coffee break because by then it will be like 11 a.m. and I won't have eaten anything or had any caffeine because I'm not a eat in the morning kind of person. And then after that, like, I met up with that person again. And then we went to things kind of around until like there was another kind of pause for lunch. And so you can kind of schedule things around that as well because there's usually like a break for lunch. There's usually like dinner at a certain time, and then there might be like 1 or 2 events after that. But I only stayed Friday, Saturday, and I left on Sunday in the morning because I was like, okay, I'm peopled out.
Yeah.
I have a 4-hour drive. I don't really want to be driving from Arkansas to Kansas at like 2 p.m. after having been super social all day. My feet hurt. You know,
wear sensible shoes.
Yes, and I didn't for my presentation, and I had a bit of a fiasco trying to even get to campus because of all the one-way roads that are around campus, and Google Maps betrayed me.
Oh.
I had a deep betrayal by Google Maps.
Yeah.
Basically, what happened was there was a parking garage that is built into this hill, and it kept taking me to the very top of the parking garage, which was actually the bus hub on campus. So I'm like driving on restricted roads and, and getting like caught in one-ways.
Yeah.
I gave myself like an hour and a half to get to my presentation, and I needed that full hour and a half. But after that, I had worn heels because I was like, I'm cute. And I had to walk up, I don't know how many stairs. I shredded the backs of my my heels. So like I have serious blisters still from that. And that was me being insensible about my footwear. And then the rest of the week I wore flats. So.
I also did a heels choice.
It's a trap. Don't do it.
And Kalamazoo, Michigan, Western Michigan University is a beautiful campus. I love it. I wish I could go back, but I'm not a medievalist. But that is such a hilly campus.
Oh my God.
And wearing heels during that conference was one of the worst decisions I've ever made.
Choices.
Yeah. I feel like most people make smarter shoe decisions than I do, but you know, that was one of those big learning experiences.
But it's also as a woman, heels are like it's like how you look professional. And I think that now we've gotten a little bit away from that, but I'm still of like a group of people who's like, if I'm not wearing heels, am I really actually dressed up for this? Like, and so for me, I didn't fight that. I leaned into it, and it was a mistake.
Yeah. Maybe a good little tangent for us, like dress code for conferences is business casual.
Yep.
Like, you know, you will see a wide range of outfits, but for the most part, business casual. Dress in a way that you feel comfortable but professional enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially when you're talking, you know, you mentioned independent scholars earlier. Those folk kind of have the whole range of clothing options, but a lot of big scholars will dress very professionally, and it's okay if you do that. Like, do what makes you feel confident and professional and comfortable at the same time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's one of those things where like just use your best judgment. You know, like hoodie, probably not. Yeah. But you know, like nice-ish shirt and like clean looking pants of some sort. Great, perfect choice. Like, absolutely. You don't have to go like, you know, full ball gown. It's okay. Or full tux.
So we're talking about kind of the, you know, the logistics of attending the conference, scheduling. So if you're planning out your day, definitely make sure you're giving yourself time for breaks, time to eat. I have personally just left in the middle of sessions just because I went, this is not for me. And also I'm tired, and I have just fully left in the middle of a session. It's all right. Like maybe one person's going to notice.
Yeah.
So, you know, I do think that there's sometimes a pressure to attend full sessions to make sure you're there and active, but everybody gets tired at these things. There's going to be plenty of people who are skipping entire sessions or only attending like 1 or 2 a day. So do what feels right for you. But definitely if you're there with a group of people, try to coordinate, you know, places to meet up. often conference maps are very confusing, so it can be
Yes.
very helpful to say, like, we are going to meet here at 11 a.m.
Yep.
to check in. Thankfully, with smartphones and technology, you can usually just text people, but also it's good to have a meetup plan.
Sometimes cell service in convention halls is shoddy. It's
good
real
point.
bad.
Yeah.
I think about a conference I was an intern at, and it was hard to get a hold of people. And I was like part of the staff.
Yeah.
I was interning at it. I was essentially, a volunteer, and sometimes you just couldn't send a text to your like the person who you're supposed to be like, oh, hey, this, we're moving this to this, or we're, I'm doing the live stream here, etc. Like sometimes it's hard to get a hold of people. So having like a predestined, like, we're going to meet at the mezzanine floor in this place at this time works really well.
Most conferences nowadays, especially if they're bigger ones, and even the smaller ones too, they'll have a support staff.
Yeah.
So if you are lost, just flag somebody over, and usually they can give you pretty good directions of where you're going or where you need to go for sessions. I was at 4Cs, which is the big composition conference last year, and they were in a massive conference arena or conference area in Spokane, Washington. And I mean, this place was huge, and there were like 3 buildings that were like connected by a skyway,
of course,
that you had to cross for various sessions. So getting lost was very easy. But thankfully there were enough staff on call that I could, like, the time I really did get lost, I was like, hey, can you just tell me where this room is?
Help.
I feel crazy.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the staff is there to help you. Usually there's someone around, especially for the really big conferences. They try and staff up. They're like, there is somebody nearby. And even sometimes other conference goers will help you out. Like if you can't find a staff member, and be like, stop someone who's clearly at the conference and be like, hey.
You all should be wearing your lanyards and or tags or whatever identification it is.
Yeah, usually a lanyard. I think I've only ever had like lanyards. They hand you a little name tag, and you just wear it around your neck, and you look like a silly little goose as you walk around.
One of the smaller conferences I went to, or I presented at IU, was through the School of Education, and they had wooden name tags that they etched your heat etching into the wood. I was like, I'm keeping this forever. This is amazing.
That's incredible.
I know, but it was a small conference, so I think that's how they got.
That's like
they got away with it.
It's like a boutique conference.
Yes, but it was a good presentation. It was on like writing center work and education. But yeah, so there are a lot of things to consider. I think one very helpful thing is to just feel as organized as you can. There are definitely going to be some hiccups or issues that you run into. Like especially if you've never been to that campus before, you're probably going to get lost a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah, it happens. It straight up will, and it's okay. Someone will help you.
Most students at KU don't even know where every building is.
You don't ask me for directions anywhere, including apparently in Murphy Hall, because Murphy has two, there's like an odd side of the building and an even side of the building.
That's evil.
Oh, it's, someone asked me where like 132 was, and I was like, it should be right. Oh. It's like, that's 133, that's 131. We're missing a number. And the student who asked me the question was like, you know what? Okay, it's cool. I was like, you might stop at like the office. Like there's an office on the 4th floor. Go talk to them. I just go here.
I think one kind of final thing I want to talk about before we close out this conversation, which has been very fun, is alcohol.
Yeah.
So most conferences have happy hours. Yep. There's usually a lot of like, oh, let's meet at the bar after sessions and, get a drink. I do think that graduate students need to be careful.
Yes.
I've been in situations where the alcohol is a lot and you get very drunk very quickly, and you are surrounded by like scholars in your field.
Yes.
So I think there's value in making those connections and having those social situations. But, this is just a like word of warning. Pace yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. And honestly, a good rule of thumb is like just have one drink at these things. Like you're there as a professional. That's at the end of the day, you're networking. And it's probably not smart to really overdo. I know half the time it's free. A lot of the times, like, if there's like a happy hour sponsored by the conference, sometimes it's free.
Sometimes it's free.
It's really tempting, I think, on some levels to be like, oh, it's free. I'm gonna have like 3. You're still there to be a professional. And the professionals around you, they may not, they may have, a couple of drinks too. And so you just want to make sure that everyone's still doing their professional thing. And at the end of the day, you're at the start of your career as a graduate student. Make sure you're doing things that serve you. And, it's one of those things where you also don't have to drink.
Yeah, you don't
I'm gonna
have
say
to.
this.
There's no pressure.
I hardly ever do. And at these kinds of things, again, my rule is always just I'll have one, and sometimes I'll just like sip it.
Yeah.
Like you just nurse that for like a long time so that, you just have something to hold and you can like talk and like have little tiny sips while you're talking to people, and that way you're still engaging, you're still having the conversations, you're still a part of the social aspect. You just don't have to like go crazy. At the same time, it's one of those things where
you know your body,
you know yourself. Yeah, so do what you know is best for you. But
also the worst thing is to have a hangover when you're at a
oh my God, who wants to do that? Like, who wants to come to a session at like 10 a.m. and be like, I feel horrible.
It sucks.
Like, why did I do this to myself? Like, no, you're going to want to be like fresh. So, it's one of those things where remind yourself what you're really there for and how many things you have to do the next day. And if you have to like get up at 3 a.m. to get on a plane, there's different things to consider. Absolutely. But those social hours can be really fun.
They can be so fun.
They can be so much fun, and you can meet some really cool people that way. I know a friend of mine met a couple of scholars that I think he's ending up doing like parts of a chapter of a book or something like that. Like, so there are real like benefits to still attending those things and still like making those connections. And there are some really rad people out there. Like we've got some cool people in scholarship. So, don't be afraid to go and have a nice time. But just, be aware. Yeah. Be aware of yourself.
Be
and
aware.
That's all good.
Have a good time, but have a safe time.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Anything else we want to talk about in terms of conferences?
No, yeah, I think we've covered like most of it. Conferences it can feel really overwhelming the first time you go. I'm just going to say that. The first conference is like, where am I? What am I doing? I'm so scared, but also like this is really exciting. And like the first one is always like you're just going to be jazzed on nerves. But like after the conferences I've been to since my first conference, I've felt more and more comfortable. Yeah. And I'll say this about the one I just went to. I finally feel like I'm a scholar who's holding my own.
Ooh, look at that.
I know. It's like,
that's wonderful.
Take that, imposter syndrome.
Yeah. You punched in its face.
But I felt like I was having and keeping up with intelligent conversations with professionals, and you will get there. Yeah. Like if you do conferences enough, you will learn how to, be the conference person. Yeah. Like there is growth in it, and you won't always be like jazzed. Yeah. The first time is like really always hard, but like after that, you learn how to do it, and you learn how to really behave in these situations, and the longer you're in academics and doing research, the more you're going to feel really excited about your own topics and being able to engage with other scholars on it. And sometimes it's like the most exciting thing because it's a bunch of people who are like, this is a really cool topic. Can we all just talk about it? Yeah. And then you will. And I always walk away from a conference being like, yeah. Like that was okay. It was worth it. I had a good time.
Weird, but it was fun. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's just something I just want to put here at the end, is that they are almost always like really fun, engaging time, and as overwhelmed as you might be before you go, or being like, oh my God, I don't want to travel before because I'm always that person. I'm like, I don't want to leave my house.
Yep.
Why do I have to drive 4 hours? This sucks. I hate driving. Like,
Yeah.
and then I get there, I'm like, everyone here is so cool. Oh my God. And then I leave and I'm like, that was good.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
Yeah.
And I have friends who have talked to about this. We all feel the same way. It's always like, oh, I don't want to go. Oh my gosh, I'm having a great time. Oh, that was fun. You know, like that's always the progression for us. So anyways.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. So we will end it there. Thank you so much for listening. Happy writing, y'all.